Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Tone Talk with Mark Uzansky and Dave Friedman. Got a special co-host tonight, special guest co-host with Pete Thorn, demo extraordinaire on YouTube. And also we've got a legendary producer, engineer, Bob Rock. In case you don't know, Bob's worked with Loverboy, Bon Jovi, Metallica, Bryan Adams, Motley Crue, Michael Bublé, David Lee Roth. The list goes on. We're going to ask a lot about that tonight. So without further ado, Bob, how are you?
I'm doing great. Really good.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
On a 4-month holiday that I wasn't expecting, as we all were not expecting. It's like I've told people I've never had 4 months off in my life since I started at Little Mountain in '76. So this is quite different, but it's very cool. I get to play all my guitars and use my amps. So
there you
I'm
go.
a happy guy.
That's a good thing. Do you have plenty of guitars and amps, I assume?
Yeah, I've been collecting, basically from the first time I made any money. I've been obsessed with it for many, many years since I was a young kid.
Yeah.
Do you keep a lot of your guitars and amps there? And I know you're in your studio or you're at your place in Hawaii. Do you have a wide selection of stuff that you keep there?
Yeah, when I had an operational studio, I don't have that now. It's because of the budgets and everything with all the artists that I work with. It didn't work anymore. It was too hard to kind of keep going. But so when I first started here, I didn't know I was going to record as much as I did. So I ended up bringing everything I owned here. So pretty much it's here. But now I've ended up taking a lot of stuff back to the mainland. So there's a lot of stuff in Huntington Beach where I work with Dexter in the Offspring. But a lot of my stuff is at the warehouse in Vancouver, Bryan Adams' studio, which is where I do most of my work. And a phenomenal studio. So I've got a lot of my stuff.
I was going to ask you about that, if that's
there.
your primary place where you work in Vancouver now, since you work so much there at Little Mountain and stuff, which is no longer there. So now it's the warehouse, eh?
Yeah, basically the guys that built and teched Little Mountain, John Vertasic and Ron Obvious, they ended up, Brian bought a building and he put a studio in, and they designed it and built it. And so it's the same people basically, and Randy Staub and Mike Fraser and myself, we all work there. It's like it's the perfect studio. It's got the most amazing Neve. The one that was commissioned, there's three consoles. The last ones that Neve made for George Martin. And he's got one there, and then it's got SSLs, it's got 4 rooms, it's got all the mics, it's got everything. It's an incredible room. So, wow. And of course, in Vancouver, the budgets and stuff, because of the Canadian dollar, it's a great place to record. So I do as much work there as I can. Everybody that goes there just can't believe how great it is. So, and it's got windows in it.
It's got windows.
It's got sunlight and stuff, which is very cool. Yeah, it's not unusual. A cave, so it's
right. Unusual for a studio.
It's great to work in.
That's cool. I was reading an interview with Brian about it, and he was mentioning the windows and the kitchens, how all the studios have kitchens, and so there's great, you can bring cooks in and stuff. And
yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah,
awesome. So we're going to get to a lot of questions. We've got some super chat questions already, I see. We'll get to those, I promise, real soon. I'm just going to dive right in, Bob, and jump into a question I have, because most of my favorite albums have been from me, through the 80s. You've worked on. So I have a question about Loverboy right off the bat and their guitar tones, because Turn Me Loose, fantastic guitar tones. Can you talk about what, if you remember at all, what gear was used on that, and how you approached the tones on that?
Oh, well, that's really easy. It's kind of, I will say that previous to working with Loverboy, I had never met a guitar player that had like a certain tone tone that was his signature. Like everybody that I had recorded before just brought in the amp that they used live, blah, blah, blah. But Paul Dean came in with, this is my 4x12. This is the high watt head I use. I built my guitar. This is my tone, recorded. And it was just like, I was going, wow, this is what I always dreamed about. And so, basically, he kind of pushed me. He was the guy that really had the biggest influence on me at the start of actually understanding getting guitar sounds. So we, basically by, kind of like a method that I came up with then that we did is we just, to get that sound, we used the two mics that I've used my whole career, a 421 and a 57, and usually a room mic, an 87 or something. And we just moved the mics around, found the right speaker for each mic, and moved it around till there was a sweet spot. I moved it around. He listened in the control room. We found those, and we put it up on the Neve, and that's the sound you hear. The only thing is, "Turn Me Loose" is the only one we didn't use the high watt on, and I'll talk about the high watt. It is actually my super lead, and he wanted to try it, and so it's dimed. It's like I bought it in the late 70s new, and it was dimed, and he stood in the corner because he had a single coil in the corner at Little Mountain facing the corner to get rid of all the hum. And that's "Turn Me Loose." That's the only one that's a Marshall. Everything else is the high watt. And now this high watt is really interesting because it's a Canadian only high watt. Okay. In Canada, because the high watts came to Canada and everybody wanted overdriven sounds, the guy that distributed them in Ontario modded it, and he ganged the two inputs and put in some sort of, I'm not sure how he wired it. So there was only those amps that came through Canada. It's got an Ontario button on it or whatever, some label, but they were ganged, and that's Paul Dean's sound. And I own one, and everybody that from Hetfield to everybody I've got, as soon as they hear that, they buy one. Everybody I've ever recorded has bought a Canadian high watt 50 because it's the only amp that makes that sound. So there you go. And that's Paul Dean's sound.
Wow.
And that's, like I said, it had such a huge influence because he was the only guy that was like all the guys that I've read about, like this is their sound, this is their amp. He was the first guy that actually said, this is my sound. So that stuck with me, and that made a huge impression.
That's fascinating, man. I wonder if
the funny thing,
I was going to say, I wonder if Lifeson
there's
ended
a great
up
story
with
this.
those too.
So the whole, yeah, actually, I could talk about that, but the funny thing is, the whole time I was doing that album, he was on my case, and the band were on my case because they wanted it to sound like a Pat Benatar album, right? This is so great because, which is Chin Chapman, right, at the time, or Mike Chapman, right, his engineer. And they were pushing me, and I'm going like, okay, it was tough for me. I was learning a lot, and it's great because about 2 years later, I was in New York working with a band called Spider, and Anton Fig was the drummer. And he was working with Mike Chapman, and they had the first Loverboy album, and they were busting the engineer's balls to try and get that sound. So I thought that was pretty funny.
That's cool.
See, now
it's
you
all
have
about
me
the guitar sounds, right?
Now you have me intrigued. I want to know what the deal is with the high watt.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm thinking about Canadian high watt players. That's why I said Lifeson. I wonder if he used Canadian only, maybe from the same.
Well, he used, was warmed up for Rush in Toronto. And when I did an album after we played with him, he used the Country Club and Country Marshalls, which are kind of an interesting Marshall, right? I think they're called Club and Country or Club Country.
Or
anyway, that was that sound on, the main sound, right? And I didn't have a Marshall or anything, and he actually said, he sent his two of them for free. He sent them to me to
Oh.
use in the studio. I couldn't believe it. What a nice guy.
That's cool.
Yeah, they have a certain sound. I've got one in my warehouse.
Wow.
It's that sound on, Tom Sawyer, etc. That's that whole album.
Yeah,
Those amps.
I guess he used to run one clean and one dirty, and then they'd blend them like in the studio. You'd run them
Yeah.
both at the same time.
And he used those live. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll find you one of those amps, Dave, if you want.
You'll what? You'll loan me one?
Oh, he froze up at the wrong moment.
You froze up at the wrong moment. Oh,
Are you there, Bob?
Yeah.
Okay. We lost you there for a second. What'd you
Okay.
say about the high watt for Dave?
I said, I'll find you one, Dave.
Oh.
I'll find you one of those high ones.
Okay. I'm just curious what's going on inside. That's me. I've been kind of on this quest of
I mean,
documenting like famous amps.
I
and
was just
why.
gonna, the interesting thing about it is that, of course, like every English amplifier, they vary, but I would say that there's a good 80% of them have that sound.
Right.
I would say, because I've gotten lots of amps for other people. Yeah.
Cool.
That's cool. So Dave, you want to jump in? Do you have a question?
So don't you have a Jose modded Marshall too?
Bob,
You there?
can you hear us?
Looks like we got a bit of a freeze, eh?
We have a bit of a freeze.
Okay.
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's time for a Fortaleza.
Technical difficulties, people.
Yeah, well, let's do a cheers.
Let's do a cheers.
Oh,
Cheers, and we lost him.
he's buffering.
Okay, end of the show, people. Sorry. No.
Yeah. The great thing about this software is that you
Oh,
can
there-
come back.
He's
Redo
back.
it.
Are you back, Bob? Oh no.
We have some bandwidth problems.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like a proximity to Wi-Fi thing.
Yeah, I wonder.
Maybe.
Well, while we're waiting for Bob
Well, anyway.
And the internet, Dan Pfeiffer had a question, so I'll get to that, Dan. I promise.
Related to Bob. He basically asked how many guitars are in your collection. Faves.
Any favorites? And do you live near Kirk?
In Hawaii? Well, maybe we'll answer those questions when Bob comes back.
Yes.
Thank you, David Garner, for a $3 super sticker.
Tell us about the amp you were going to ask about, Dave.
Well, I was going to ask about a Jose modded Marshall that I'm pretty sure Bob owns, that he got the same time. I think the same time that Metallica got theirs, or maybe Metallica got it after Bob's.
Okay.
Hey, Bob.
I'm back.
You're back.
You're back. Yeah, that's probably not the best.
I'm sorry about
Wi-Fi
this
for you.
Yeah, I think your connection is a little poor. Is there any place else that you might have a stronger Wi-Fi?
I wonder if you send him a text, Mark.
Yeah, I'll try.
If might be best, just see if he's got a.
Well, let's see if there's anything for me in here. I think I saw something in here. Saw something.
Okay. I'm texting.
You guys have questions for Pete or I right now? While we're waiting for Bob,
Joe Alba's asking what we're sipping on.
I
I think Dave's got a Chimay.
have a Chimay going today.
Got a glass of Fortaleza
with a.
I'm drinking Sam Adams. So
David Vivar. Bob's in his
and
car.
man, that's. I hope he comes back. So
It's Hawaii, it's like,
yeah.
low key.
He was saying it's really windy there, I guess, right now. And he's saying even with the house and stuff, he thought the car would be quietest. So I think that's why he's hanging out there. But we'll see if we can figure it out.
Maybe he'll move.
Yeah.
I saw someone ask me something somewhere in here, and now I can't find it. But
Okay, I see him here. Hey, there you are.
Different truck.
different truck. Is it closer to the Wi-Fi?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we just have a little connectivity problem. Yeah, we have a nice floral print now going on behind you.
That's full Hawaii.
Yeah, so it's like I can get a pretty good snare drum sound and a guitar sound, but yeah, internet, computer.
Can run a big Neve console, but forget about the internet, right?
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I think it's endearing.
So what I started to ask you about was, don't you own a Jose modded Marshall?
Yes, I do. And I got that because when I did Dr. Feelgood, Mars had a Jose, and he explained to me where it came from. And, just hearing it. So actually, I was lucky enough that I decided to get one right away. And so I talked to Jose. And what blew me away is I never met him, but I described to him what tone I wanted, and I got the amp, plugged it in, turned it on, and it was the tone. Like, I really could not believe that just by talking to him, he nailed it.
Do you remember what you had?
Well, I said that I didn't want it like overly gainy. I wanted enough gain, etc. And I wanted kind of warmth in it. Not like what people will call Eddie sound, but just kind of a little more MIDI, a little more rock.
More classic.
So I didn't go for yeah. Now, interestingly enough, that is the only other amp that was used on James' sound on the Black album, is that we added the Jose Marshall in rather than EQing mid-range, which is something that I've always done. It's kind of like get the amps that have the voice, right? We added a little bit, just a hair of that, and it brought a lot of the face that you hear on what I call face presence, the mid-range that, it's kind of the scoop sound with the boogies, etc. that they used. The Marshall added that just one little kind of hint of mid-range at the right volume to the overall sound. That made a huge difference. So it's almost like using, just a different color. And kind of that's how I've gotten guitar sounds ever since I, got into using two different types of amplifiers or whatever, for different qualities, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great way to do things.
Well, yeah,
one might be cleaner, one might be more distorted, one might be more mid-range, like you said. Yeah, that's a fantastic way to get great sounds. Blending.
Well, yeah, and I think to me it's the only way, because every amplifier has a certain, because of through the years just buying so many, you kind of figure out what is great and what's great about Fenders, Marshalls, high watts, just other different kind of amplifiers, and from certain eras they have this tone. And I've always thought, like when you first start engineering and recording, it's always about EQ and stuff and compression. What I realized, no, it's mic mic choice, mic selection, the right speaker boxes, the right heads, the combination, the guitars, everything aside from EQ is the most important thing. EQ is the last thing. And mostly the EQ that I use now is always in the mix, and that's to make the mix work. Most of the stuff that I recorded is pretty much flat.
You mentioned you use a 57 and a 421 for years and years, as well as like an 87 for a room mic. Is that something, do you often put a room up with those two close mics?
Well, yeah, and this is, depending, but really where I got the most out of a room mic was working with James. Like I always recorded a room mic, but it was always very distant. So what it did is it added a depth, and that's an old trick that everybody's used for a long time. But the 57, the 421 are pretty much, well, I can tell you a whole pile of stories, but let's finish with the room mic. With Hetfield, basically it's 421s and 57s on the cabs. And of course we spent, finding the sweet spots on the speakers, the best cabinets, everything. And then basically, if you get the right gain with both those, even gain on both those mics, you pretty much got the sound just like that. Okay. But part of his sound is what he calls crunch. And crunch isn't the crunch that I thought it was. I always thought crunch was kind of in the top end. His was the bump in the bottom, which is kind of a resonant frequency. And so it's the way he plays. And, he just likes this certain thing that is in his sound. So I had never done that before. So what we ended up happening is what I heard with what they had done before. I heard that it was a distant mic. And that's how you get that kind of thing. So what we did is we ended up building a room at 1-on-1 with mic stands and plywood. And I moved the 87 around for days and placed it height, distance, and we moved the panels in and out. And we found one spot that was the bump that's about 300 or 400 cycles that just went. It kind of has this sound like it's a gunk. And that's part of the sound, right? When he mutes, palm mutes, it just makes this resonance. And as soon as we hit that, we didn't touch it. That's the sound on the Black Album. Now, the interesting thing is when you add that, all the kind of like sizzle in the top, the harshness with the boogies, etc., it went away because there's just a hint of room, not distance, right? Pretty close. But so there's a little bit. So it just got rid of a bit of the irritating stuff in the top end. And that's why from top to bottom, that sound is just so magnificent because it was shaped with microphones, amplifiers for a long time. And it took us like a week to get that sound,
Wow.
And it was all about doing the work, right? Spending the time, getting everything right. And really, him telling me what he wanted and me just trying my best to kind of, translate what he was hearing. And it's a long process, but evidently it worked. The funny thing about the Jose amp is when we were doing guitars, because I basically recorded the guitars with them. I punched them in, and they're so tight that it took forever to get 3 tracks of James Hetfield super tight. So he'd sit behind me, because we're in the middle of the speakers. And while we were doing all the takes, the Jose Marshall was behind him. And while we were doing guitars, he turned in the Marshall by using duct tape and whiteout. He changed the Marshall into asshole, right? Over a period of 3 months. So one day I looked behind and I looked. That it's basically the asshole was me, right? So the whole took him 3 months to do it, but it was hilarious though. And by the way, I've still got the asshole amp in my studio.
Oh, the tape and everything. That's great.
Yeah,
that's
there's
amazing.
a picture of it. Yeah, that's James' sense of humor.
The funny thing is, so what year were you recording a 1-on-1 the Black Album there?
90, 91, mainly 91.
Yeah. I actually remember at that point in time, I'm a little kid, basically working for Andy Brower's Studio Rentals.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure we delivered some stuff to you on that session at One-on-One. I remember it distinctly. Obviously didn't know what it was going to be at the time. I knew it was Metallica, but that was it. But I don't remember what was rented or what it was, but something was rented.
Well, yeah, I think what we did is like with Jason, with his sound, you know, he had a very bright, almost guitar sound, and during pre-production and everything, we got into the fact of getting him to play more like with the drums and augmenting the bottom kind of as a bass player, as a rhythm section rather than just doubling the guitar sound.
Yeah.
So ended up we tried every amp and bass that was ever made.
Right.
we debuted everything, and we got a lot of stuff at Andy Brower's, right?
Yeah, because right
And
down the street.
And guess what we ended up with? An SVT and a precision bass.
Shocking.
The old Chevy truck of basses, of bass rigs.
And but the amazing thing is Jason embraced it, and then he went, whoa. And of course he's got a collection of those things, but it's kind of interesting that the thing that is actually the standard, we tried everything, and then he got about the fact that with the Black Album, it wasn't just him doubling the riff. A lot of times he did, but he ended up being a bass player. Like it strays from just the riff, and he became like with the drums. So it's pretty cool, and it filled in the sound. There's bass on that album.
Oh yeah, definitely. So real quickly, I want to get to Dan's question. We were talking about your guitar collection. You've been collecting for a long time. He wanted to know how many guitars are in your collection, or any favorites. And also, do you live near Kirk Hammett?
Kirk lives in Oahu. Okay, I live in Maui. Which is a different island. But I will say one thing: as I went to visit Kirk, and I played the Greenie guitar, right? Peter Green's guitar.
Yeah,
right.
Which was wow,
heavenly.
That's all I can say.
That's so good.
Well, yeah, like it's definitely beat up, but the sound to it is, and Kirk and I figured it out, and Alexander Dumbum, a friend of mine, we kind of figured out, and basically what we figured out is that the pickups aren't actually out of phase, just one of the coils out of phase, which is why in the middle position, it's not, because I've wired my Les Paul, the way like out of phase. So I know what out of phase humbuckings sound like, right?
Right.
And it didn't sound like that. I picked it up and I went, no, this is not right. This should not sound like it does. And we figured out that one of the coils in the humbucking at the front is actually out of phase and one's in phase. So it retains the bottom. That's the sound of that guitar in the middle position.
Just kind of thins out a little bit or something, eh?
Yeah, it puts a scoop on the top, which makes it warm because it's out of phase.
Yeah.
That's what I figured.
Wow.
Interesting. We also have a super chat. Oh yeah. Go ahead.
But you asked something else. What was it before I went off on a tangent?
Oh, how many guitars are in your collection?
Probably. I didn't really count, but I imagine 150, 175. But I will say that what I did is I collected sounds, and you got to understand the problem I have. Is that every guitar?
I think that's a good problem.
We can appreciate it.
Yeah. You see, the thing is what it's like if you start at the seed of kind of like the way I've worked is I remember all my favorite guitar players. I have the amps and all the effects and all the guitars that they used. Probably my closest collection would be Gilmour and Jimmy Page. And so, this is an example. So I've got a Coronado, the real deal Coronado off Led Zeppelin 1, which usually comes with 2 10s. So I found one years ago, anyway, so and it sounds like the first album, but it doesn't quite sound like that. So anyway, to make a long story short, Alexander Dumble reconditioned it for me, brought it back to Maui, and I'm sitting here and I finally found a replacement for the Oxford speaker case. You can't find that. Put it in a box, and I got my 59 Esquire, and there it was. And I went, this is it. But it wasn't quite it. And I'm going, what is wrong? I go on the internet, and somebody talked about, well, they always used a JP1. And I'm going, what is that? And I go like, oh, it's an Echoplex, a tube Echoplex at the time. I've got Mick Ralph's one that he used in Mott. So I grabbed that, ran downstairs, hooked it all up together, and played Good Times, Bad Times. And I was a 13-year-old. It was like, oh my God, I nailed it.
That's great.
That's
awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, you started out as a guitar player, and I often wonder, because then you're working in the studios and stuff too, and I often wonder, was the goal to play guitar, be in bands and stuff, and then was the studio production, engineering, mixing a happy accident, or were they both your focus? Or
you don't really plan this stuff out. What happened with me is that it was always about, like, there was always better guitar players than me, always. And, so I decided, like, let's put it this way. One of my favorites was Pete Townsend. And I went, who am I the closest to? And it was Pete Townsend. So I concentrated on rhythm, okay? And then when I got into that, I got into the sounds of guitars. Like, I can remember the first time hearing Honky Tonk Woman in that sound. I remember All Right Now, that sound. I remember the sound. So that's always been big. When I bought the second Queen album, Queen 2, I bought it. I went, I don't know what's going on here, but whatever's going on here, I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. So it was not a switch about being a guitar player, but I was going to learn how to do that. So I became obsessed with sounds, the instruments, and I wanted to know how to record that. I wanted to be able to do what I heard on the second Queen album.
It all sort of goes hand in hand. If you have this love for the sounds, then you want to know how they recorded those sounds, because that's such a big part of it also. And it's that all goes hand in hand. Yeah, I totally. And I love Pete Townsend. Same wavelength.
Yeah, so it's funny because I actually met him years ago on my birthday, and I totally geeked out with him. And I told him the story. I said, I tried to be like you, and I once hooked 16 of my friends' speaker cabinets up to my little amp at one time just to look like I had a Marshall like you. And he was completely bored and walked away.
Oh.
But I said you were the guy. Anyway, it was amazing to meet him because he was a huge he was one of a big influence for me. I have many of them, that have been lucky enough to meet. But he's one of them, and had, earlier on, I just concentrated, like I said, on sounds and rhythm. And then I gently worked myself into being able to play, solos and lead,
Yeah.
Right.
So that gets into not just lead sounds, that gets into rhythm sounds, which is the basis of kind of what I'm about in terms of, like, because when I'm talking about, I'm not talking like with Metallica, we're talking about James's rhythm sound. It's Pete Townsend rhythm sounds, Keith Richards, Paul Kossoff, Dave Gilmour. Of course, there's a lead thing, but you know what I mean? That's the essence of the subtleties of amplifiers to me. Of course, that is true also with leads, and I'm not underestimating that. But the core of it is that, that rhythm sound from, Malcolm Young, the rhythm player, right? His sound,
Sure.
Absolutely.
Great story there. I met him when they were doing Thunderstruck. I was doing Motley, and his Gretsch, the pickup windings broke in that main guitar. And so Paul Rogan, what's his name?
Alan Rogan.
Alan Rogan came over and said, Yeah, he says to me, he says, Bob, do you know anybody that could rewind this pickup? And I said, I know the guy. There's a guy in Vancouver whose mom worked at the Fender factory in the 60s, and he does amazing jobs. He rewound Malcolm's pickup, okay? And Malcolm was so happy. He says, if you buy a Jet Firebird, I'll get Ellen to copy everything, exactly like mine. So I bought that. And once again, you plug that guitar into with an amp, and it's not Malcolm, but it's the sound.
Mhm.
So I still got that guitar.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's just like, and you never realize what it is until you actually see it and hear it and know why it sounds like it does, and then it all makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Thanks, Joe, for the super chat. By the way, I want to thank you. So another question I had for you, Bob, was regarding David Lee Roth, your time working on the album with Jason Becker. Can you talk about that time, that album and how it was working with Jason? I think that was really his last album. He couldn't tour after that because of the ALS. And just curious, about the time with that, and then what gear was used.
Well, it was Steve Hunter and Jason, and Jason was struggling with his health, and so it was tough on him. But he played really great, and I'm pretty sure he used a Marshall, but he used, I believe, it's an Ibanez. Is that possible? I forget the guitar, but he had a a different sound. And he was definitely influenced by the whole Eddie sound.
Mm-hmm.
So we used like a phaser. We used a phaser, and of course there was a lot of guitar work with Steve Hunter, who was I was a huge fan of his because of stuff with Lou Reed especially, and it just his sound and his playing. So I loved doing that record. I had so much fun, and both guitar players were just great. But Jason obviously was a super huge talent, but it was hard to see him, you know, being unhealthy. It was a bummer, but he was a trooper and he played his heart out. Great guy too, just a sweetheart.
Yeah, what an inspiration, really, all these years.
Yeah.
Survive. It's amazing. Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Pete, any questions from you?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to ask you kind of a two-part question. I went back and listened to a lot of things that you've done and worked on, and one of the things I went and listened to was some payolas, and I was listening to "Eyes of a Stranger," which is, if there's anybody out there that doesn't know that track, go and listen to it after the show, because it's such a brilliant song. And your guitar tones and playing is so cool. And I remember that song, growing up from time I was a kid. But anyway, it's a two-part question, because I was going to ask you about how you achieve some of the tones on that, because there's some great stuff that sounds like Space Echo or Echoplex to me, Tape Echo, because it's got the reggae-like chords going on. And it sounds like a telly or something to me. It's super cool tones. But also, maybe the bigger question is, the arrangement is so cool. It starts out with what sounds like a Linn drum or something like that to me, and then drums come in, and it builds with this terrific bass line and these kind of sparse chords. And then halfway through the tune, we get to the middle eight, and it just opens up, and this overdriven guitar comes in and starts doubling the bass line, which is so cool, because I'd never really thought about it or noticed it before, but it's just reinforcing that bass part. And you've got those great clean rhythm guitars and then that overdriven line, and it's just such a great arrangement. So I mean, as part of the two-part question, I'm wondering about the rig and also how you approach arranging something so brilliantly. I know you did the Gravity album by Our Lady Peace, and Rain, in an interview, the singer from that band, said that they'd always tried to add so many layers to the music, but when you came in and were producing with them, you said, let's not try and add so many. Let's break it down and make the album sound more akin to what the band sounded like live. Better arrangement, I think. So can you just speak a little bit to that, like your approach with arranging?
Well, the Eyes of a Stranger track, well, a couple of things. How that started is when I started writing music, I said to myself, any money that I would make by writing a song, you get paid for songs get never played. I got a check, and so I decided that, and this is how I got 100 and whatever many guitars, is that the money that I make from writing songs, I put back into what I do. So I was listening to the Natty Dread album by Bob Marley, and I noticed that there's a couple songs that there was a drum machine. So I found out somehow what drum machine it was, and I bought one. So I bought that and fiddled around, and I kind of went, I'm going to write a bass line for this song based on kind of listening to Natty Dread. So I wrote the bass line, and I recorded it at the studio over a Hudson's Bay commercial after I did a jingle. And the drummer of the Paolas was working at the studio. So we just did that demo. So we did the demo, and we just overdubbed it quickly. And when Mick Ronson came in, who we can definitely talk about, what was amazing with Ronson, and I could go on about him, he listened to the demo and said, we're not going to get much better than that. And he just added the keyboard. So that song is basically a demo that we made in probably a day. Mm-hmm. So there was no thought put into the arrangement. It was just, we just winged it, and it just happened to work out, which is the magic of making music and working in studios. You know, I'd say the only thing that probably is, I was so comfortable being in a studio. The studio can be very kind of terrifying to a lot of musicians. I was so comfortable that I could work really quickly and stuff. So, yeah. But Ronson was probably one of my biggest muse in terms of learning how to arrange it, etc. You know, so he helped a lot becoming a producer, I would say.
And what a legend to work with too.
So,
oh my God, yeah,
yeah,
no doubt. Go ahead, Dave.
So, tell us about John Sykes.
Yeah.
So you helped out with something there, or something
on the Whitesnake album.
Okay, so what happened is, I forget who I was working on. It might have been Motley and Mike Fraser and Mike Stone and Sykes. They were recording the Whitesnake album, and they had been working on the guitar sound for, I'll just guess, at 2 weeks. They brought in a PA to put the guitar amp through. They tried everything, and finally Mike Fraser, the assistant, came over and said, would you come over and help us get a guitar sound? Okay. And I said, sure. So I took a break from whatever I was doing, and I went over, and basically I did exactly what I just talked about. I said, John, I'm going to move the mic around when you like what I hear on this speaker. I'll stop moving it. We'll go to the next speaker. 421, 57 on the two best sounding speakers. And then I said, what I normally do is I usually delay and modulate a second power amp and split the sound. Okay. So he had another box, and we used the slave on the boogie. And so it was kind of like a stereo sound, and I kind of recorded it once, got the sound, and then he flipped it the other way. Now I'd done that with Motley. Okay, with Mars. Anyway, but case in point, and within an hour we had the sound that's on the album. And that's just really being, and this is a key point with recording guitars, is you have to get a player involved in getting the sound. It's not your interpretation of what the sound is. It's like, if I move the microphone and you like it, basically if you use those two mics, and with the gain at 0, and you move the mic, you're going to get the best guitar sound that you could possibly get for a start. Okay. And that's what I did. And Sykes, so immediately we were best friends. The guitar sound that he wanted in basically an hour. And that's why I did the Blue Murder album. And by the way, he's probably the best guitar player I've ever recorded.
Yeah, that helps. So you did this. You got the sound at the mics, but then you said that you delayed and did a bit of modulation, right, to do the stereo split.
Yeah,
went to another
Yeah, you just mic up, you slave it, and you just I used like a Roland, and it has light modulation. It's not even a chorus. It's just a slight delay, and it just fills the room. And when you put that in the other speaker and you double it and kind of flip it, it's that wall of sound that works. And I also use a little bit of AMS chorus, and of course, all the clean sounds that I've gotten right up to now always have the AMS chorus on it,
Okay.
which is a chorus strip that you can get. That's the sound on the Black album, and it's Wanted Dead or Alive, the 12-string sound. It's the Cult. It's pretty much everything.
Is that the AMS that's the reverb and delay that you can also make a chorus?
No, it's the delay unit, and you have to buy a special chorus strip. They're very rare to find. But
so you guys can't get it.
That's it.
I see people searching. People are searching reverb right now. They're like on reverb. Where do I find
yeah.
Oh, man,
well, the guy at Studio
Electronics.
Electronics.
So 42157.
Of course, sure.
42157, your standard go-tos. That's more than just you. There's a bunch of people that I know that do that same kind of thing. That's, I think, a very old approach to things, and still probably the best.
Well, what's interesting about the reason why I use those is what I found is that everything the 57 lacks, the 421 has, and vice versa.
Yeah,
so
it's like the hole
like
in the center.
Yeah, it's almost like 6L6s and EL 34s, right? Do you know what I mean? It's the exact same concept.
Yeah.
Tone.
So
Anyway, go on.
Is there a place you put these on two separate speakers, the mics, or one speaker?
Yes.
Two separate speakers. And do you put the 57 off center cone? I'm going to get real geeky. Or on center, or what about the 421?
No, what you do, this is really simple. First of all, you just use a mic and you find the best sounding. A 57 or 421. You just grab that and find the two best speakers in the cabinet, right?
Yeah.
Each one sounds different. Mm-hmm. So you find the better ones. And then I would go out to the studio, wear earplugs, and I would move the 57 around, going from off center to center, anywhere. And basically the guitar player would listen. And when, I do it very slowly, and they'd stop playing, and I would stop, and that's a sweet spot. Then I go to the other mic, right? So in other words, he's involved. He's hearing what he wants to hear.
Yeah.
And you're finding the sweet spot. And usually that kind of, you combine those two, and you're pretty much 80% there. I mean,
so you pretty much find the sweet spot for each mic, whether it's more on center or off center, depending on the artist.
Yeah, I don't have a rule whatsoever in terms of where it is. It's really depending on what the guitar player hears, because a fraction of a fraction movement can mean so much. It's kind of
it's interesting. That miking is exactly the same thing that, I mean, I've worked with other people too, like Brendan O'Brien and stuff, and he does the exact same miking technique. I mean, it's still, it's a 57 to 421, two separate speakers, and they're
two separate speakers. That's interesting.
Two separate speakers, and they put them where they sound good, essentially.
I have two questions.
I think Bob
takes
it a little further than Brendan. Brendan, I think, kind of has a standard spot. He kind of puts it more in, but like with you adjusting it, I think you take a little more time with it.
Do you have a favorite?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite speaker, a couple of speakers, and also do you ever go off axis, or is it usually mic straight on?
Well, there's also the whole thing that Brian May does, and a lot of people do, is actually purposely put it out of phase and go off axis for a tone, right? I've done that many times, right? Where you actually put something that's not in phase and you move that around and find a tone. So I'll do that for sure. But that's getting away from the basic thing. Once you find that basic sound that a guitar player is happy with, then you can do anything. You can go out and venture, but you can always come back to that.
And do you have a
answer the
certain
question?
Yeah, pretty much. And do you have a certain speaker preference?
Well, it's a funny thing. It's really the vintage 30s from the 80s, the ones that are manufactured. I just bought a whole whack of them again for my cabinet to respeaker my Maisha. You know, what is it? They're 70 watts, but they're the vintage.
So the
30s.
early era of vintage 30s.
V30s, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. I would say all the albums that you mentioned, everybody, all those albums have that speaker because of the warmth in the mid range, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and they could handle the bottom, right?
Exactly.
Rather than a regular, rather than a greenback, which would fold in the bottom with most of those players who use that bottom. A vintage 30, a greenback could never handle that. With that rhythm sound.
Yeah, when you think about Metallica and things.
Right.
Yeah, that's the speaker that could handle it, right? And you get used to that. And like I said, I just respeakered 2 of my cabs, and they sound great. They're the English ones, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, the funny thing is when I started working when I moved to California when I was 18, I started working in Andy Brower's 1987. So, this was the tail end of the 80s, and I would say 90% of all the Marshall 412 cabs that were rented for these records were vintage 30s. Of course, there were vintage speakers also we had greenbacks, we had other things, but most of the time, majority were vintage 30s. Now, depending on the player, a greenback can be great, but exactly what Bob...
of course. But I think when you're trying to help somebody form a sound, or you go to the basics, and when because people drag all sorts of stuff into the studio and they expect the sound that Eddie Van Halen has, and you're going like, well, dude, your guitar, and you have nothing that's going to get that sound.
Especially what I mean? Hands. They don't. You don't have his hands.
You try and explain. Yeah, exactly. Of course, and we could talk forever about that, of course, because when I play through James's rig, it doesn't sound like Hatfield. It's the same equipment, right? I pick up his guitar, and it's a version of him, but it ain't him. But anyway.
So I have a story.
The point being is, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I have a story about Hatfield. I actually have James's Jose here.
Oh, wow.
Because they said it never sounded like yours. and Greg Fiddleman, obviously, who works with them now, contacted me, and he's like, can you make this better or fix it or see what's going on with it? Or I don't think it's right.
Dave, I think you've had about like 6 or 7 through your shop. And
I've had a million. I'm like the Jose historian.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
6 or 7.
The funny
25.
Just in the last month, maybe, though.
Yeah.
But I think, well, for one thing, great amp makers like yourself, Jose, and Alexander Dumpel, right? It's like, like Jose, he talked to me, and he got me the sound that I asked him for. Do you follow me? And it's the same with Alexander Dumpel. What so many people that buy and sell Dumpel amplifiers, you don't get the deal out of it. You don't get the sound out of Alexander unless you spend time and he hears you play. He makes the amp for the way you play.
Sure.
And the great thing about you, Dave, I will tell you, is the way you make amplifiers, it makes everybody sound good. I'm not kidding. And I'm not just saying that. And I gotta tell you, for me to find a Plexi 100-watt super lead, it took me 15 years. I must have gone through 60, and I found one.
Right.
Now the thing is you make an amp that always sounds amazing. every one I've heard. Okay, that is a feat, and that's why your amps are great. Is that you can take it on the road, it lasts. It's not like a vintage one that if you lose that vintage one or blows up, you'll never get it back. Right. Yours are consistent. You take all the best of what we just talked about and made it in an amp. So I'm giving you a very big compliment, but I believe it, and I wouldn't say it unless I believe it.
High
so
compliment
that's why.
That's massive.
The thing, the key, you're, and to be quite honest, you know, like Richie's got great Jose. His Jose sounds really good. Mine is different, but it was Jose did it for what I like, because mine doesn't sound like what Sykes had and what Mars had, right? They talked to him. Mars went to see him, right? His sounds stuff, right? That's the point.
I've worked
just
on
buy that sound.
Yeah, I've worked on many, and there's many variations of the mod. Some are lower gain, some are higher gain, some are way higher gain. You know, it just depends. I just worked on Sykes, so I worked on one of his and Vise, and I've worked on many of them. I've seen like 30 of them, and they're all a little different. So it's like Alexander, who I know also, he makes the amplifier for the player. So he works with the player to make the amplifier that works for him. So just because no two Dumbles are the same. I said that the best Dumble, we had Steve Ferris on our show once. And Steve Ferris had a great Dumble. And we were talking to him about that, and he was saying he sat with him for weeks, driving him insane to try to get the tone that he was hearing, you know, that what he wanted out of the amp. And in the end, he got it. And I still say that's the best Dumble I've ever heard, was Steve Ferris's old Dumble, which he later sold. But it sounded remarkable.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I normally don't love overdrive specials. Those aren't my thing. I like the clean side of them, but the overdrive is not my thing. I'm more of a Marshall guy. But I understand. But Steve's, I really liked how his sounded.
Well, yeah. And I think that's what's so funny about the people that spend a lot of money on Dumbles. It's like, unless you know the man and you're with him, you're not really getting what he does. Anyway, but I'll tell you, the thing is I don't have an overdrive special, but I've got modded Fenders or reworked Fenders that he does. And to me, awesome. That's just otherworldly what he does to Fender amplifiers. I'll tell you, I always wanted like Pete Townsend, right? The 310 bass Bandmaster, right? Yeah. Tweed Bandmaster that he used with the high powered, right? On Who's Next. I've got the pedal, I've got the right Gretsch, but I never found a Bandmaster that cut the mustard, right? They all sounded like shit, vintage ones. Fender reissued a Bandmaster. I went, great, this is great. Horrible. Sorry, Fender people, but it was horrible. So I said, Alexander, can you make it sound good? This is really funny. I think it's hilarious. Alexander made it a great Tweed Bandmaster, right? It was sitting there. Eric Clapton comes to visit Alexander Dumble. He said, what's that over there? He says, it's my friend Bob Rock's amplifier. He says, do you mind if I plug in? Eric Clapton, right? We're talking EC. Plugs it in and he says, I want that amp. Goes, well, it's Bob's amp. He says, no, I want that amp. So Alexander phoned me and said, Eric Clapton wants your amp. And I'm going like, what? Now, isn't that funny? I've worked my whole life. I wanted to sound like Eric Clapton. He wants my amp. Anyway, Alexander made up 2 other ones. But that's, I think that's hilarious.
That's great.
You're like, wait, but who wants my amp?
He's a yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I know. Anyway.
So
okay,
you mentioned we were talking to Sykes, and when you were talking about doing the 1987 guitar tone, you mentioned the Boogie, because I know he used the Coliseum 300 heads, but there's also the Jose connection with him. So did he on Blue Murder or on the 87 album or any other time that also use the Jose when recording?
On the Blue Murder album, he used the Jose.
Ah,
Mhm.
Yeah, he used his Jose with the boogie. It was basically the setup, that setup.
A
Blended.
blend.
The same thing. The
okay,
blend.
Cool.
Yeah, because he just loved that. And then I think when he played with it, he went back to 800s. But you know,
No,
to be in the room
he had
with that,
Jose modded 800s with Lizzie.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he it's a sound to behold when he's playing guitar in the room with that setup. I mean, it was loud. Oh my
Yeah.
I
god!
know. I was kind of like hoping he'd come by the shop when the amp was done, but
Mm,
but he it was during all this kind of madness what's going on and stuff, so that
Yeah.
didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I was
his
sort of
hands are just so
I was
cool.
sort of hoping to just hear him play through the amp in the room.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's something else. And what
Yeah.
I've always loved about him is that he's always just played that same Les Paul, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
tried other guitars and always went back. And what he gets out of Les Paul, it's just phenomenal. You know,
Right.
He's a
yeah.
monster.
When it wasn't cool to play a Les Paul, he played it.
Mhm.
Right. Question for you, Bob. This is from Alan. I know we've talked about speakers. We talked about how you go about blending microphones. What about how you blend guitars when you're recording different guitars? Do you go about with a Tele and or a humbucker bass guitar? Just curious. So we had a question from Alan about how you go about doing that.
Well, a good example is like, is the Malcolm thing. When I got that guitar, and Alan and Malcolm and Angus, they let me into the studio and we talked about amps and they showed me and basically they said, they play and then as soon as it starts to distort, they just dial it back a hair and that's their sound. And I always thought, you in your imagination when you hear it, it's distorted, but actually it's not. So, I think with the saturation that's kind of got a little overboard and still works for a lot of people. I think now more than ever, I realize that kind of like gain sometimes has a negative effect in terms of the impact. So a lot of times with Mars and with newer albums that I've done, I've always put like Malcolm or a cleaner guitar. I got a great match list that had originally had 4 EL80 34s, right? And it had a different preamp. It's like a one of a kind 410. I bought it, and I would combine that with Marshalls, and yeah, you know. But the guitar thing you were talking about, guitar things, definitely stacking guitars using Rickenbacker's Fenders, different, P90s. I'll do anything to get what I gotta get, But much like speakers, like microphones and everything, it always seems to be the blend to get the right thing. But there's nothing like when you get it right with just a basic mic setup and one guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Zambora, Slippery and Wet, and the Loverboy albums. Both those albums, it's one guitar, one amp.
One track.
Right.
None of it's doubled.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And it's
Well,
huge.
you're doing
that's
split
just
thing?
having the guitar. No, that's the guitar just being left of center.
Mhm.
That's what Paul Dean, that's what he said. That's where I want it. And I'm going like, okay, but that's why it speaks, right? And that's when the tone is so pure, but sometimes you want size, So
Wow.
yes, I use different guitars to achieve all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, but that guitar tone is huge sounding.
Which one?
Yeah.
I mean, the Loverboy stuff. I mean, that's an epic tone. I mean, I think looking back on that record, I wasn't the hugest fan of Loverboy, obviously, when I was growing up, but looking back on that record and the guitar tones were
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, and actually, I'll be honest with you. The best work that I've done is always when the guitar players and the bands really kind of challenge me and make me bring out the best in me. So I think that's always the best relationship. When you know, I'm just like, the thing where I came from being a musician, as like what you talked about, Pete, with the payolas. What I learned earlier on is that I thought it was kind of backwards when I was learning with the people that I grew up with as an assistant. That the producer and the engineer had so much power in the 70s, they'd have a drum kit set up for the drummer and they'd say, this is what you're playing, you know, and there'd be so much padding on the drums, they didn't even sound like drums. And I'm going, this is all not what I thought it was going to be. And I quickly decided that it's more about the musician and what they want rather than me. There you go.
It's interesting.
So you liked being challenged by the musician to get you to give them the best performance, but at the same time, you challenged the musician to get the best performance, such as, say, Kirk Hammett in the famous video that's on the internet.
Yeah.
Of which song was that? It was the solo for Unforgiven. When you basically kind of lost your shit on him.
Well, I did because, but you got to remember, I mean, this stuff is taken out of context, and if you look at the video, you'll see change of clothes, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that was like a week. And what, you know, I was just so tired of the whole thing. That was because he was doing those solos near the end, right? And I was kind of a little edgy, let's put it that way. But what blew me away is that after all of this, in other words, he wasn't around while we did rhythms. So I'm going, he comes in and he basically had nothing on that day, you know? And I'm going, what the fuck? We just worked 6 months to get here and you haven't been working on it? Anyway, to make a long story short, if you think about the solo, it ended up being what we had talked about in the argument.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh, it wound up being fantastic. It wound up being fantastic.
You know,
I think you pushed him to be.
It wasn't and it wasn't like I wasn't trying to be a dick or insult him. And actually, what is amazing, we ended up, and this is what happened in the whole album, is I got the assistant to make cassette copies of every song, every solo he did while he was playing live, right? And gave him all the cassettes, and all the solos after that were all from those cassettes, right? Like that they all got drawn from all the solos that when he wasn't thinking about it, he was playing amazingly, right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing. As soon as you start thinking about it, you're fucked. John Sykes' first take is incredible when he tries to finesse it. It's okay, but it's not like the first take, you know?
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's the scary part about the studio, right?
Knowing when to take what is great and leave it, even if there's a mistake.
Exactly. And that's what Mick Ronson showed me how to do. That guy, it just like even what I was describing in Eyes of a Stranger when he said, you know, he didn't have to re-record Eyes of a Stranger. He went, that's great. I just got to add a keyboard. Got to do an edit. Boom. Done.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody would do that. I never met any producer that would ever do that. They'd say, well, we got to re-record it.
I have seen stuff just ruined where you hear a demo and you're like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing ever. And they re-record it to death. And they all of a sudden, by the end of it, it's like it's not the same song and it's just awful. It's just awful. That takes all the vibe away.
I mean, Eyes of a Stranger has so much vibe, and it
captures the moment.
Fantastic. I mean, that track sounds amazing. I could not imagine it sounding any different. You know, it sounds wonderful. So,
And I didn't pay for the tape. I recorded it over a commercial. They didn't know that though.
That's great.
I couldn't afford the tape, so I just grabbed the tape out of the vault and recorded it over a commercial.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
You never wanted it again.
Oh my God.
On a day like today, which was you did with Randy Staub and Bob Clearmountain mixed, I think. I just had a little two-part thing about that as well. First of all, it's a great sounding record, like warm. This is a Bryan Adams record I'm speaking of. It's a warm, punchy, present, great rock record with terrific guitar sounds. Keith Scott, unbelievable. I'd love to know your thoughts on him. And also, besides that, I'm just wondering, like, you know, you eventually kind of transition into production, and then you had Randy working closely with Randy Staub a lot, and then sometimes somebody like Bob mixing. Is it just too much to do all three things, like engineer, produce, and mix? And you got to get your trust.
Well, what happened with when I started producing, I realized that I couldn't have a producer's perspective if I was doing all the technical stuff, right? I couldn't pay attention to the stuff that I thought I had to do as a producer. So I looked for the right guy. And when I met Randy, I went, Randy is the kind of guy you can have in a room, and he's really talented. And we hit it off as friends, and he was the guy I worked with him. And I went, will you come work with me? And he did Motley with me. That's the first record we did, and so, through the years, basically we mixed together, regardless of credits, it was always the both of us mixing,
Wow.
Right.
And it's like I still put my hands on the dial because rather than trying to talk to somebody about it, I just do it, so, but, but sometimes, like there's a certain part, there was a certain part of time when, when Chris was mixing everything, and Bob and all these guys were mixing everything, and you'd spend time mixing. And you see, I come from an age where, like, as I was saying with Loverboy and Pat Benatar and Mike Chapman, we were all in competition, so there was this coolness thing. They were all trying to be better, but when everybody started using the same three guys, you kind of go like, well, I can mix this, but they're just going to get them to do it, and I'm not slagging them. Do you know what I mean? It kind of took the fun out of it. So I went like, why am I, I do a mix and then they just use Chris's mix.
Right.
Yeah. Because that's the way the record company was working at that time.
Makes
and,
sense.
I've talked to Chris about it. It's like, we laugh about it, because Chris comes from where I came from. He's as old as me. Right. And he's a talented guy and stuff. So I'm not slagging him. I'm just saying it's got more to do with the record companies and the business. That it went that way. So at sometimes and Bob and Chris, great job. There's a lot of great mixers. There was a lot of great mixers that aren't around anymore. I remember Dave Thorn was a great mixer. There's a lot of guys that just aren't around anymore. It's too bad. That went by the wayside, whether they don't work or whatever. But I liked it in the day when I heard a record and I went, fuck, I want to know how to do that rather than hire that guy. I wanted to try and be better than that, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of went away for a while. But cool. Now I enjoy mixing, and I did this drum library with Tune Trucks, and they wanted kind of.
I use them. I got them. They're great.
Yeah. So and he kind of wanted some of the sound, so I usually move on. So I never went back to what I did with other bands, and you can't get that sound. But I kind of listened to some of the stuff that I did, and I kind of went, why did I stop doing that?
Mm-hmm.
So now I've come, and now I like mixing again a lot because it's kind of an open thing now. It's not kind of controlled by record companies now, so it's kind of fun.
Nice. It's nice that's changed.
And I think with budgets these days and everything that's going on, it's like doing it all in one person is.
Yeah, they're maybe not going to spend $10,000 to mix a single.
Yeah, no, they're not spending the kind of money that was once spent on a mix.
Yeah.
It's some of the changes, like a lot of things that have changed are good things. I'm having a lot of fun with what's going on today. I really am.
That's awesome.
So we have a super chat from David Vivar. He wants to know, what's your favorite Friedman amp that you love?
Well, the thing is when I originally bought it, I tried the Brown Eye and I tried the Steve Stevens model, and I just like the voicing of the Steve Stevens model. For me, that's personally taste. That's my personal taste. But because I've used the Brown Eye so much with Richie and other artists and stuff, I like them both for, I need to get a Brown Eye because I need them both. Let's put it that way. Okay.
Well, we have the deluxe now, so
and Steve uses them both, right? I mean, Steve
uses both. Yeah, he uses his model and the deluxe.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's my point. You use it for tones, and
he blends them.
He blends them, and that's always the best way. They both have just these voicings that are great. The guys in Classic Nico, he came up to Vancouver when we were mixing, and he used my Steve Stevens, and he fell in love with that. He just likes both amps, right?
Nice.
I mean, they're kind of very similar, but I hear the difference, and
yeah.
Anyway, I gotta get a brown eye. That's for sure.
I think you know a guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a question from Alex King. He wants to know about Motley Crue in '94 with Karabi. Were they the same amps that were used on Feel Good, or?
Yes, they were. But he did end up using. What are the? What did he use? He added those. What? He had snakeskin ones. What are they called?
Oh, the Soldanos.
Soldano.
Yeah. Soldano and the Jose.
Yeah, that's what it was, a combination. That's when he interjected the Soldano, and he gave me one too. Yeah, and he the last thing I did with him, which was a hell of a lot of fun that I did for the movie, work with Mars again. And I'll tell you a thing about this is a great story about Tone, right? Is that somebody else did all the demos, a great guitar player, I'm not going to say who it is, right? And all the demos, everything was done. And my wife said, yeah, and my wife says, does it sound like Motley? I'm going like, what do you mean? He says, it's not Mars. And my wife has never said anything like that. And I'm going like, okay. Anyway, so Mars comes out and we started recording. And my God, as soon as he plays, it's Motley. And it's because he's that sound. And his sound is Motley. It ain't Motley if it ain't that. So
well, it was sort of like when Motley didn't have Tommy Lee. It wasn't Motley without Tommy Lee. It's just like that's impossible. I remember that period of time, and Randy Castillo and then there was Samantha, the girl that played with them for a while. And I'm like going, it's not the Samantha was better, but even though Randy Castillo is a great drummer, no, it just still the feel was wrong.
Chemistry.
Yeah, and it's bands are bands, and the Karabi album is a great album, and it kind of sounds like Motley, but it's not Motley, and you need Vince. Whatever you think of whatever, I'm not going to argue with anything about that, but I'll just say that Motley is one of those great bands that it's the sum of all the parts, and that's what makes them great. Like I think a lot of great bands, like you can't replace Malcolm. I'm sorry, it just ain't the same. And same with Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Phil Rudd, I would have a hard time.
Phil Rudd, I feel the same way.
Yeah,
Phil Rudd.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's the feel, it's the heartbeat. It's like changes.
Yeah. So there's another question from the Anthony K here, Bob. He represents some artist, and he's been told that he's seriously interested in working with you somehow. How does one approach that?
Well, the way it works is that it has to go through my management, and that's Bruce Allen Talent in Vancouver, who's managed me since basically for 40 years, manages Brian, etc. Yeah, it has to go through that because it can't be just, you can't send a CD because of the legal consequences of getting a CD,
Sure.
So as long as it goes through that, I'll hear it. There you go.
Anthony, you heard it. So there you go.
Okay. Let's talk about the snare on Saint Anger.
I'm fine with that. But the thing is this is interesting.
This was more of a joke question. You realize that, right? Because a lot of people just ask that and like,
but there is a story. There is a story. Here's the thing. While we were doing that, we went to their clubhouse when we were in San Francisco. We went to their Oakland place where they rehearsed, with Cliff, right? And we went with the fan club and we had a great time. And Lars told me about his drums were set up in a certain place, and we were looking for inspiration. Let's put it this way, because James wasn't there. So anyway, so I got Fleming. I said, drag out the drums. He talked about the drum kit that he used. So I said, pull out the drums, the double kit, because we were fooling around with other drums. So he set up the drums in the rehearsal, and we went on our way. And Lars just kept staring at the drums. Finally, he sat behind and he says, just give me a snare drum. I had bought a Plexi Ludwig snare because I wanted to try it. And he put it on the drum kit, and he said, that's the sound. And I said, what? And so basically we did a demo, and I used like 2 58s, a 58 on the kick drum, and a couple just whatever cymbal mics were around. And we did a demo, and that was the sound, and he just would not go back. I'm not blaming him, but this was about basically, if you can wrap around a concept, this was the sound of the drums when they were rehearsing in Oakland. Do you follow me? Sure. It's basically the closest to them being in that clubhouse. So it was a way to inspire those guys. And, no matter what St. Anger, what anybody says, it kept the band together. Okay? And that inspired them to go on. So I'm okay with all the flack I've taken. I'm satisfied.
I love bold stuff like that. I mean, it's great.
It's bold. It's a good, whatever. I mean,
awesome.
Get over it, people.
Yeah, it's a fucking snare drum sound. Give it a break. Listen to, what is it? Roundabout. How about Roundabout? Roundabout. It goes goink, goink.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you got it. Exactly.
Oh, you dropped the phone?
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. What Bob was saying earlier about the same mixers, the same 3 mixers mixing everything, and everything starting to sound, and that the same drum samples start ending up on a bunch of tracks and stuff, and all that. I mean, shit, I'd rather listen to something that sounds different any day, just because I hear everything that sounds exactly the same all the time. Like the perfect snare drum sound.
Well, the thing that changed, that really made a change in my perspective as an engineer and producer, was the Octane Baby album by U2, where they played with the perception of drums, and sometimes you barely hear the drums. Sometimes the bass is the loudest thing. You know what I mean? In other words, throwing away the rule book. And part of St. Anger is just throwing away the rule book and say, why do we have to set up the drums the same just because metal, that's what you got to do in metal? It was like, I was thinking more like Raw Power, the Stooges album. Right?
Yes.
Do you follow me?
Yes.
And without the solos, there was a band from San Francisco called the fucking Champs that all they played was riffs strung together, kind of like a punk metal band. And so Lars and I were talking, and it's kind of a cool thing. And we just said, if you can put a great solo on this, Kirk, go ahead. And it just never worked. But anyway, there you go. A little bit of history there.
That's cool. I mean, I love that aspect. I think metal's tough because, like, a lot of metal fans, they're the most like hardcore fans, but they also many times want bands to repeat things over and over again. And like, you try and do something creative and do something different, and that can lead to a lot of hate from fans sometimes.
Right.
And it's tough, They're artists. They want to change.
Well, I'd say when I bought Led Zeppelin 3, I heard the Immigrant Song. I went, great. I bought the album. I went, what is this shit? And now it's my favorite. One of my favorite. Right. You know what I mean? I was in the Led Zeppelin club. How could you do acoustic guitars? What is going on? Right? So I understand the mentality behind it. I get it, and I'm okay with it. You know what I mean? It's like whatever.
Yeah, the funny thing, you just said that, and I was going to bring up, well, what about Led Zeppelin? Led Zeppelin experimented on vast majority of their records, and they morphed, and the sound morphed and changed over times, and they experimented from record to record with different sounds and different things, and I think that was beautiful in hindsight,
Yeah.
And I understand the same position with listening to Led Zeppelin 3. What's this acoustic stuff? I want Led Zeppelin 1.
Yeah, it's like, that's just when you're young, and you're just like, because you belong to that club, and you know, and it brings back memories. But when you, I don't know, when you expand your horizons, you realize that there's more to everything. So I cherish everything Led Zeppelin done. Clearly, you know. By the way, I got everything he had. Every amp, every effect, every guitar.
All the Jimmy Page.
It's
Really?
sick.
Of course you do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of Led Zeppelin,
Of course you do.
Yeah.
let's we have a
I
question.
just got his book, by the way. By the book,
yeah?
right? The anthology with all the pictures. It's something to behold. It's really expensive, but he photographs everything.
Oh,
I have
It's kind of amazing. You got to look at the book. It's incredible.
oh wow.
Yeah. Now,
Okay.
okay, now I need it.
So we have a super chat from Unfucking Believable. Thanks for the super chat, Bob. Any memories on working with Kingdom Come, the gear? Any stories? And the same question for Sonic Temple.
Well, Kingdom Come was the first thing when somebody, Derek, what's his name? Derek. Oh, fuck! I better shut up. The A&R guy. Derek Shulman. I had to get it right. Derek Shulman. He was the A&R guy with Slippery and stuff, and he says, "I got this band. I'd like you to do." So he gave me a shot, and Kingdom Come was the first thing where I broke away from Bruce Fairbairn. And you know, basically, they wanted to sound like Led Zeppelin, and I was up for it. So, you know, the drummer was a great drummer, and we just tried to get as close as we could, you know, with what I could do at the time. I was learning to be a producer, and yeah, and it ended up turning out really good. It's a great album.
It's awesome.
Yeah. You know, in terms of it's a great album and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed it, and of course, there's always a story. So I got to meet John Paul Jones once. I went for dinner with him. And we were talking about all sorts of things, and we ended up going to this house of the A&R guy, and we had a couple bottles of wine, and he found out I did Kingdom Come, and he started ranting on me. I had to leave. So it was just like, he was so insulted that I did Kingdom Come, and I'm going like, dude, we did. You don't get it. We did this because we love you guys so much. It's like, but it was so horrible. It was all right, and then it was like, yikes.
Oh, man.
You just can't win, right?
Right.
You can't win on that one at all, man. Jesus. I mean,
now Sonic Temple is like, I was a huge fan of the Love album. Okay, I love that. And I like the Electric album that Rick did. But what Sonic Temple was basically the hybrid of those two, the best of the Love and the rock ethic of the Electric album, you know. And it was basically the two guys. Billy was more rock, Ian was more kind of cosmic, right, and more electric. So there you go.
That's interesting. Hybrid. That's cool.
It's a hybrid.
And it is.
Like, because the great lines were back, right? You know, the great melodic lines that Billy did were back, stuff like that. But I loved the sound of that record, and that was a big part of why Metallica got hold of me. It was Sonic Temple and Dr. Feelgood. They liked the sound of both of them. You know.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Was that like from a production perspective? Like, because when I think of Electric, it's so dry. It's rock. It's great, but it's so dry. And then Love is, like you say, the more like the lines, and it's more ambient and
more
stuff.
Alternative, kind of in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. And less AC/DC or something. Yeah. So was that like, was that like your production sort of bringing that to the table, or is that something they wanted to do? Like, get back to that.
Not really. I think, you know, the thing is I do this back then, and I still do it. It's like you know, like you preconceived ideas of making albums. It's like you basically set the rules, and then you say, this is the album we want to make. But you end up making the album with the certain amount of people in the room, with, you know, and it ends up being what it is, you know. Like conceptual albums, maybe style or something, but overall the album becomes what it is with a lot of work. So the point being is, we did pre-production, get the arrangements tight. We went into the studio, and sonic tempo became what it was, because when we were finishing and you start finishing a song, well, what do we need here, and what was good about the Cult, and I said, why don't you do those lines anymore, Billy? And it was like Ian, like, well, it takes us back. I'm going like, well, we should do them. And somehow he did it, and he liked it. Like Fire Woman's got those lines all the way through it, right? But it's kind of a combination of both. So it's just a question of being in the room and talking and realizing sometimes you got to go back to just realize why people like certain things, right? So yeah, but I think Sonic Temple worked well, for that reason.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Huge record.
So you did a Crocus record, right?
I did.
With their first
That's when
big record, right?
No,
No.
it had Midnight Maniac on it, I think. I forget which one it was, what it was, but it was done on a 3M digital machine. Digital didn't sound very good. They wanted to do it on, and Bruce Fairbairn and I did it on Neve console, and you can't hear the Neve at all. It was Crocus digitally was not fun. It hurt. But it's a good album, and they were great guys.
Was that their second record? That wasn't the one with Screaming in the Night and stuff in it.
No, it was after that.
It was after that. Right.
How do you feel about that now?
Great guys.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Digital?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the analog digital thing now, all these years later, like.
Well, here's the thing: is like, when I go back to Loverboy, and I mean, before that, we had a 16-track Scully, and we used to, as soon as we recorded something, we'd EQ when it came back, because we had lost so much because of the tape. You follow me? Yep. And you lost all the transients and everything. Now everybody, kind of loves that sound, but what ended up happening is I didn't go to digital. Well, I went to digital on the Black album because there were so many edits on the drums that basically the tape, we were afraid that it was going to fall apart. So we transferred the analog tape to digital. So I got a Sony Digital 24. And that was when it started to sound good. Okay. And since then, I stayed with analog as long as I could. And then when digital 11 album, and they said, we do analog. And I said, well, I tell you what, we're going to this great studio. They got great mics and Neve console. I'm going to record both analog and digital, and I'm not going to tell you which one's which. And you guys take a choice. And what won was the digital. And the reason why is because when you use great consoles, mics, and you know how to record, you don't need the softness of the analog. And you actually get all the character of the Neve and all those wonderful mics. You actually retain that. You don't have to battle back from it. So now I'm kind of a digital guy. And the other thing is like during the days, it's like on the tom tracks or guitar solos on the Loverboy album. Do you know what I mean? It was like we would find now, I went over lead vocals, right, that were great because you tried one more and we lost a good vocal. So there's archiving and all sorts of stuff. It's like, and I got carried away with digital and all the tracks, but now I've come back and I've realized, what you learn, and I'm still learning how to be good at what I do. I try to be the best as I can, and I'm still learning, but it's that right combination, even the plugins now, I still I mixed Richie's new album and the Offspring's new album on the console because I went back to the console because it just doesn't, I can't mix in the box. It doesn't have what I do. So now we mixed it on the console again, and I love it, and they loved it, right?
It's interesting. It almost sounds like a kind of hybrid approach, like the tape, not so much, but you're okay recording to digital, but you like an analog console, some analog gear.
Yeah, the whole point to this, and I think really I'm a sum of all the things, is I'll do whatever it takes to make it sound great. I don't have rules. I don't care about rules because I don't think I would have gotten anywhere if I kind of adhere to a certain thing. Even as an assistant, I saw Like they didn't even have dynamic mics at Little Mountain. They only had condensers. I brought them in because I saw them in magazines. I bought the first 57 that came into Little Mountain because I saw it on a sleeve of a cover, right? So it was all about like, you know, like not being afraid to change and to learn, you know.
So
that's so key.
Yeah, that's cool. Awesome. We have a super chat that we missed, Dave and Pete, from Metal Up Yours. Were there any particular stomp boxes used with Metallica, or were they all rack effects?
I don't recall.
Tube screamer.
They use tubes on the solos. Kirk used a tube screamer and obviously a wah-wah, right? But they also, I believe, I know that they use tube screamers on the rhythm sounds on some of the earlier albums because I asked them. You know?
Yeah, because he asked specifically about like the chorus and Bleeding Me, or the compression used on TBA.
Well, that would have been studio stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of like for instance, it's like there's like all the clean guitars are all AMS chorus. There was no chorus pedal. It was a Roland Jazz chorus with EVs, by the way. Jazz choruses sound amazing with EV speakers.
They do, don't they?
Yeah, they do. That's
killer.
That's the big trick. That's the sound on the Black Album. You got to get the EVs, and then that's
a Billy Duffy thing too, right? The Billy Duffy.
Absolutely, and I got one too. I mean, yeah, that's the sound, and that with the jazz chorus and James's guitar. You know, that's the EMGs. That's the sound.
Almost like a direct sound, isn't it? Like very
clean. But actually, we use direct too. So it's a combination. Once again, a combination of direct, the jazz chorus, and the EMS and everything. Yeah. Just to get that sound, the sound that he wanted, right? That hurt.
So, how you doing on time, Bob?
The windows are fucking up because I can't have the AC, right? So I'm dying to be here. But it's fine. I'm up for the challenge, though. I'm okay.
Somebody was asking in the chat about.
So Pete, what about the thing when you saw him play?
Oh yeah, shit, that's right. I saw Rockhead in '92 at a club in Vancouver, and it's the loudest show I've ever seen in my life. Loudest show I've ever seen. You were peeling the paint with but I went to see you play in '92. God, that's a long time ago. 28 years. Yeah, that was your band. Can you talk a little bit about that, like about getting back to making rock music yourself, playing guitar and stuff, like around that period?
Yeah, I guess doing the Black Album and some of the other rock albums, I kind of went, you know, because I wasn't partners with Paul, my childhood buddy and stuff, and I just felt like I wanted to be in a rock band, you know. So we got together and we started playing and stuff, and I did that actually because I was doing the Rockhead album when I was doing the Black Album. So after when I get up at like 8 o'clock in the morning, rehearse the Rockhead until I came to the studio at 2 o'clock. So we did that album while I was doing the Black Album, which was insanity. Awesome. Anyway, but you know, so it was me just being around guys like, you know, all the guys that I was around, and I realized that, you know, I'm basically a rock guy. You know, that's where I come from. And so the Palos were a different thing, and it was of the time. So anyway, and I took guitar lessons, etc. You know, while I was there too, and I just got into it. And so Rockhead was good, but what I realized is that really my manager had a talk with me, and he said, you know, this is what you do best. Let me manage you, be a producer. And so I listened to him, and
that's worked out for you.
I miss.
It's worked out for you. We've got a question from More Guitars. Bob, you still there? Okay. He wants to know, have you used any IRs, impulse responses for recording, or is your preference always to use a mic on a cabinet?
Well, what I do is I do a lot of demos now. I do a lot of writing, like I wrote with Richie. And what I do is I do a lot of demos with my camper and using, uh, you know, yes, I use camper samples that I've made, impulse result. Yeah,
How do you
Okay.
feel?
because it's so quick to, when you're in the moment, you want to get something done. Yeah,
Does
What do
it, does
but
it get pretty
it's
close
funny,
for you?
certain. Uh, Never like the same thing because you never get the air, you never get the weight,
Mm.
But I've got camper profiles, with I haven't got my Jose, but I've got Richie's Jose and your Friedman and stuff like that. But I never use them on records, and we only use them if it's something apart that we can't replace or something that's on a demo. Um, but like I said, this kind of stuff is what I've come to know is that like I can put together a track in like a couple hours. I mean, I could never do that with tape. It would take me days to put together a demo.
Right.
And so now I can reach into my own profiles that I've got, and I've got a sound in like basically, well, I don't know, like seconds. Right? Like when we're doing Richie up in Vancouver, I read about that on Led Zeppelin. One of the heavy sounds are basically a Leslie with the motor unplugged, right? And you can hear that now. So I've got a great profile of that,
Oh,
right,
that's
that we
cool.
did, and it's the sound, right? So I use that all the time.
That's cool.
Page was a clever guy, man. Oh my God!
Yeah.
Have you ever
Big
tried
time,
that? You
right?
got to try it. It's the same. Yeah, yeah. It's Led Zeppelin 1. It's like, yeah, you shook me. Everything.
Is
Yeah,
you
as
think it's
a
a Leslie?
studio,
No speakers moving, like the speakers aren't rotating, right? But it's the
yeah, just going
Yeah,
through
you just unplug the motor, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
You can
Okay.
hear it. I swear to God. You stand next to it with that. You plug in a telly, and you go like, "Oh my God, that's the sound." Of course, it's not Page, but it is the sound.
Yeah. Have you ever met him?
Yes, I met him when he was doing Coverdale Page, and
Ooh.
he came to see Rockhead, and him and Coverdale left because we're too loud. But it's kind of amazing. I had one of the most amazing nights of my life. Rockhead warmed up for Bon Jovi in Europe, and Jimmy came to visit. I was getting dressed, and he was outside, and they said somebody's here to see it. And it was Page, and I was shocked. And so he watched the show. He stood right beside me, the whole show, outside of the stage. We got finished, and Richie and him and I went to this hotel, and we talked about guitars and music with Vernon Reed from Living Color all night. All we talked
Wow.
about was guitars and amps and stuff. And it was one of the most amazing nights of my life. And we became buddies ever since. Every time I see him, he walks over to see me, and I'm going like, really? He knows my name.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
an excellent guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Excellent.
That's incredible.
Very cool.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, Beck, right? Well, the three guys, we got to just briefly, those three guys were the guys for me, by the way, when I was a kid. It was the Truth album, Led Zeppelin 1, and of course, Cream. So, like, Beck has always been huge. And when I saw when Metallica got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and they played the Immigrant Song and Beck did the vocals on his guitar, all the guitar players at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, all our jaws were on the floor. We were going like, what? It was just the most incredible display playing ever. Anyway,
that was super
He's
cool.
so magical. I remember I saw him at House of Blues once here in LA, and I remember a bunch of guitar players standing in the row, exactly that, all our jaws on the ground. He was playing Over the Rainbow, I remember, and I looked at a great guitar player, Lyle Workman, beside me. I said, he's the best guitar player ever, like in the world. He says, absolutely. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
We should mention Keith Scott though. By the way, Keith
What's
Scott
that?
and Brian Adams. What a guitar
Oh, Keith.
player.
Yeah, I asked
What
you
a
about
tone.
Keith is
Keith
unbelievable.
Scott, you mentioned Keith.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the.
Ah,
Oh man.
we got to hear about Keith.
No,
Keith
but
is
no, the
Oh, brother.
player because he was famous.
Go ahead. The
He
Wi-Fi.
was. Oh, really?
Yeah, we got
Yeah,
a little dropout
You don't hear
going.
me?
you're good now.
Everything from Keith
Okay.
Scott on, we didn't hear, but
Okay, so Keith Scott, he was in a band called Zingo, and he played all the stuff on Blow by Blow, right? Note for
Oh.
note. He was everybody's hero, right? So,
Wow.
anyway, to make a long story short, but he plays the part that Adams needs. That's what a great guitar player is, and he plays it so cleanly. But that guy rips. He can
Mhm.
play anything. He's
Wow.
incredible. One of the best
Yeah.
I've
I
ever
agree.
heard.
Did you run across in Vancouver much? Did you run across Too Loud McLeod?
Yes, I know. I knew Brian well. Yeah.
Such
Good
an
guy.
amazing guitar player and
Good player.
amazing tone. This is just for the Canadians because I don't know if a lot of Americans know who he was, but I mean,
I couldn't believe he got such a great tone with the Music Man amplifier because I used them for a while, but he got a great tone out of the Music Man. Remember
And
those?
Yes, and the folklore was that he used to mic a PA. Like that's how he got the tone on the Headpins albums and stuff. Was he'd mic the amp and then have it coming out of a big old Martin PA that's somewhere in Vancouver and mic the PA. Did you ever hear that story? Because I was
That's
wondering.
what he did. Yeah.
Really? Wow.
No, I heard it. Oh yeah, yeah. I guess it worked.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
I guess so.
I can't imagine it. Yeah. Whatever you got to do, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Vinny, thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. And the kind words. Really appreciate it. We've got another super chat from Abraxas1. He says, Bob, can you talk about using a PA in the tracking room when doing drums? Is that to get the performance out of the artist, or does it add something special to the sound?
Well, that came from Tommy Lee. It's like when we were cutting drums at Little Mountain. He used one of those bumper seats, and they, it wasn't doing the trick. And I said, so when you play live, you have monitors, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, let's just bring in monitors, and while we're cutting, like we're rehearsing and stuff, let's just put the subs behind you. And he goes, that's crazy. And I said, yeah, let's try it. So we did that and filled up the room with the subs. And Tommy was stoked, and that's all that mattered. So, and then the plus of that, it filled the subs through, like it went through all the drums. So I quickly realized that this is kind of a good thing. So once again, it was satisfying Tommy because he wanted the weight of a rap song. He heard a rap song and he says, I want that kick drum sound. So he pushed me and I went, let's just fucking do it. So we got a monitor and we put him behind the drums. It didn't work in front. So I put him behind so he could play the way he plays live. And he was stoked. And then I just dealt with it, but it ended up being a positive, and that's what I did on the Black album too, right? It's just you can't add too much. You got to be careful because I definitely did it too much, and then I had to dial it back. But I know it's insane, but once again, no engineer in their right mind would ever do that. It's because of the rules, and too bad.
Break the rules.
Break the rules. Exactly.
It's too fucking bad.
We got another question, and this has been asked from Push 22 Frets. How hard do you push your Neve pre's when printing? How hot? How low? That's what he asked.
The Neves that I use, 1081s, I don't use. I use the way I don't push them. To be quite honest, I mean, I get the level that I need. And, in the tape days, we pushed it, we we were at +4, so there was some questions on the tape. But with digital, I just make sure it's clean. The sound of the Neve is a beautiful thing. It's got plenty of punch because of the transformers in it and stuff. So you really don't need to push it. I'd rather be able to do that afterwards, you know, so I have more control. I mean, the key to like, I made a lot of mistakes when I was, you know, I did a Prism album, a Canadian band, and I heard that Queen, you know, overloaded, right? So I printed all the mixes really, really hot, and basically George Marino at Sterling saved my ass because it was horrible. It sounded horrible when we went to master. So I learned my lesson. It's like you gotta go with your ears. So whatever works for your ears, that's where you should be. Yeah. So like, in other words, I don't do anything that's in theory. Like, I heard about things and I try things, but I usually go back to Neves sound great when they're clean, and you know, there's plenty of level and plenty of harmonic distortion in them that you don't need to push it. But you can push it to get a sound. I've done that before. Like, you know, Black Dog, you know, the Neve pushed through to LA 1176s. That's Black Dog direct. Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
There you go.
So basically, whatever works for the artist or the sound you're going for, it doesn't matter what it might be. Obviously, you could. It's like, hey, you know,
no, it really does.
George Lynch told me a story that he was recording a record and with Michael Wagner, and they had this old little 4-track Porta Studio. And he'd plug this guitar into the Porta Studio.
Yep.
And then come out of the Porta Studio into the front of the Marshall or whatever amp he was using at the time. And there was this sound. It would preamp the Marshall, and there was this sound that he got. And they were hiding the Porta Studio under the console and stuff, so no one would see it and all this stuff. But it was a tone. It was a tone that they got, and it was a tone. And it's like, yeah, well, that's not normal, but who cares about normal? That's the sound. It's just
it's really like, yeah, you know, it's like Brian May, you know, putting the Echoplex in front of AC30s, you know, and even the Jimmy Page thing with the Coronado. I mean, the sound was not the same until I plugged in the Echoplex, the tube Echoplex, and then that was the sound. And he probably put it because he liked the sound of the Echoplex. He didn't care about the hiss, right? He just wanted that sound, and it warmed up the telly. That's why it sounded fat.
It sort of brings back something that I've always said. So I've built people's guitar rigs for a million years, and when someone comes to me and they have this concept, this thing they've been using, you know, I use this pedal into this, into this, into this, and that gets me my sound. Well, I take a listen, and you know, if it's a great sound, you're not going to change it. Don't change it. You know, it's like, no, you can't do that. You can't put your delay first and your wah last. Why not? If it gets you the sound that you like, you can put it in any order that gets you that tone. It makes no difference. It's like all the great guitar players that had these signature tones did some sort of unique thing. Like Pete interviewed Ty Tabor from King's X, and you know, and he's talking about his Lab Series amp that he used, and you know, his Fender Elite guitar with the preamp in it, and the whole thing made up the tone. And Pete bought one, of course, right after that interview.
Yeah, sitting right back there.
And he bought one.
In there. I'm like, Bob, I gotta buy this.
Aren't you going to get a preamp from the Fender Elite guitar too, so you really get the whole thing?
Oh man, I've been on Reverb to buy the damn guitar so many times.
He's finding the tone just like you, Bob. You buy the tone.
Well, because it's a thrill, right? When you plug in and do the whole. I mean, I did a video here on treble boosters a while ago. And John Shanks lent me an old AC30, and I got the treble booster, and I got Shanks's Brian May guitar back there, and I got to plug it all in and see if it actually sounds like that. You know, it's the hobbyist part of it that's
absolutely
really fun. But to your point, I think getting your own sound. I mean, when we think about everybody from Blackmore to you know, well, you mentioned Bronson. I mean, like
Blackmore plugged into a tape deck into the front of a major.
That's right. He had a Kai. Well, and in the early days, AC30, right? And sometimes, and it just sounded so damn unique. And now it's like, what's the perfect pedal order? And it's like, well, you know what? It's like the perfect pedal
whatever you
order.
like.
Yeah, when you plug them in and it sounds like you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe in when I build rigs. Yeah. When I build rigs for people, I don't believe in
Go ahead.
Dictating what they should have.
Yeah.
It's, well, what are you using? That's a cool sound. Okay. That's okay. Like I learned long ago that what you think is going to be a horrible sound, might not be with that person.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's certain people. I remember I worked with a band years ago called 1000 Mona Lisas. A signed artist. He brings me his rack, and he had a Boogie Triaxis preamp and a Mesa Boogie power amp and a ART Smart EQ. I don't remember those from the 80s. And then he had another pedal path, like 3 pedals into a silver-faced twin with JBLs. The silver-faced twin with a master volume, the worst possible twin ever. When it distorted, it just sounded like just breaking.
I can't even imagine.
But it was kind of a punk band. And when he played the combination of this Triaxis with that silver-faced twin with whatever pedals he had going, the combination of the two, and you heard him do what his music, it was amazing. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
well, there you go.
From that point on, I'm like, I'm never going to judge what someone is doing until I really hear what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. It all fits within a context, right?
Absolutely.
We have a super chat from More Guitars. No problem. Thank you for sending in your question. We really appreciate it. And the super chat. There was also another super chat that I'm just going back here from. No, that was, I already asked that one. Did I miss it? Here from Colton Knowles. Thank you for the super chat. Bob, anything special? And you may have already answered this. Anything special to get the sad but true rhythm sound? Was it the same Jose Marshall with the mic setup, with guitar used? Anything that you can provide on that? He said the sound seems bigger on that.
Well, the sound is just because it's down to D. I mean, that's what changed. It's the same amp setup. But, like I said, the majority of James's sound is the Mesa Boogie, right? Like I said, the Jose was the addition. That added flavor to it. But make no mistake, it was his rack, which is the Mark III, right?
Was
Mark
it a 3 or 2?
And he had, of course, the AD. No, it's a 3.
Okay.
It was a 3, and it was like, and he also had the ADA graphic along with the graphic on the Mesa. You know, I mean, once again,
Another graphic.
That I think I just spilled it.
Spill the beans.
Like another graphic, like he tweaked. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the the ADA ones, remember?
Sure. Okay.
The digital ones.
Oh.
Yeah, so he tweaked furthermore the sound, right?
In the effect loop of the amplifier?
Along with,
would it be in the effect
use
loop?
BBE. What? Yeah, it would be in the effect loop. Yeah.
Okay.
And a BBE?
See? No, they originally had that. Like that.
Okay.
They came in with that, but then they ended up using the ADA one. Yep.
So totally sculpted it.
So there you go.
Yeah, that can be a big change, obviously, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're approaching the 2-hour mark. Go ahead. You have a question? Oh, okay. I was just going to say maybe we should. We've exhausted a lot of all the questions here. Dave, Pete, do you guys have anything else you want to ask? Or
I mean, I think I've got to just about everything on my list here.
This was fantastic.
Yeah, it's been
one. So what was it like to work with the Offspring? I kind of know this answer, but
Oh, it's like the best. It's
Yeah.
the best. I'm having the time of my life. You know, it's like it's just the best. And not only that, I got because they have Friedman prototypes, don't they, that you built for them? We've used
they
them.
have a naked amp that I made for a while. That was the duct tape thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
The
whole
duct tape
different
thing.
sort
Yeah,
of
they
amp.
both got it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, Noodles is like swears by them. Yeah, definitely. He swears
Yeah,
by them.
I go pretty far back with them at this point. I've been through a few before you came on board, I was around for quite a few records, and yeah, it was always it's funny. I never early on I never really loved the band until I got to know them, and then I really loved the band. It's interesting, I got working with them really pretty early on, and I traveled with them. I even filled in as a tech occasionally with them, and they're awesome guys. And don't go drinking with them though.
Yeah, your liver might not be the same, right, as it was before.
We've got another super chat. Bob, what 5 amp models would you consider timeless benchmarks for versatility and tones? I guess for the Kemper.
I think we got a freeze.
No, I don't think so. I think he might mean amps.
Oh yeah, 5 amp models. Okay.
Models. I mean, I think he's referring to amplifiers.
Okay, you might be right. Yeah.
I hope.
Models of amplifiers as opposed to
5 amp models, not profiles. Okay, but we lost Bob there for a second.
Yeah, I think we're still lost him.
We've done pretty well, all things considered. I think
so too.
Yeah.
He just disappeared.
He might come back.
If that was the end, this has been great.
I agree. Hopefully he'll click the link back so we can say goodbye. But what amazing stories.
Yeah.
I mean, just so I'm going to have to go back and rewatch this myself.
Oh my God. You can get so many more stories if, really.
Oh,
I feel that we just touched on what really could be talked about.
Yeah.
But
I love the chat with the Canadian too. That makes me feel good. What's that, Dave?
The person that asked the super chat didn't mean amplifiers. He fixed that.
Yeah, Bob's got this great, wonderful, like down to earth Canadian thing that I love. So it's terrific. Yeah.
I remember the first time I met him, I was he wandered into my shop.
Oh yeah,
I think he was across the street or something. He wandered into the shop.
That's great.
And he's like, just I forgot how even he struck up the conversation. It's like,
appreciate it, Bob. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Bob. Really appreciate it. All right, well, have a great night. Take care. Bye-bye.
I guess that's it, guys.
His phone overheated because it was so hot in his car. His phone overheated.
Yeah. So there you go. Bob Rock, amazing producer, runs a bunch of software and Neve consoles and everything, but his phone's overheating.
Yeah. Derailed due to technical difficulties.
But he's a really nice guy, and how nice.
I'm sorry we didn't get your question with Bob on his 5 favorite amps. Seemed like he really favored that Jose he owns.
Mm-hmm.
I wish he could have answered all that, but he seems to have every amp. So
I'll take a picture of the question and see if I can get him to answer it.
Yeah. It sounded like, he's really got an appreciation for like all across the board, right? Like Dumbles and then your amplifiers, Friedman. If it's 2 different camps, but it sounds like, and he talked about the 310 Bandmaster and obviously using a Leslie. Like it sounds like if it's a great classic guitar sound, like he's across the board, he's got an interest in it, you know.
Yeah, or any kind of unique guitar tone that he collected. Basically, like he said, he collected guitar tones, not necessarily guitars and amps. He collected
Right.
the tones. So
Yeah.
he was searching. So what did Pete Townsend use? Well, it was the Gretsch with the 310 Bandmaster with finding the right combination, or Page with the Coronado and the Telly and the Tube Echoplex, and
thinking like a producer. I mean, this reminds me of friends of ours like Shanks, or that are
thinking like a producer, but don't sort of, at least I know I do. I would collect the tone. I would say, hey, when I was a kid, it's like, how do they get that tone?
Yeah.
And I want that amp that'll do that tone, or the combination of pedals that'll do that tone. And I still to this day, and I've collected a lot of it over time.
Yeah.
And I know what my favorite amps are now. I know exactly what the meat and potatoes of, amps are.
But it's interesting, right? Because even you, like, we got the L5 here that I bought and plugged it in.
That was
You're
great.
Like,
I mean, I never heard one in person.
Right. So there's still discovery.
There's still the discovery. Well, the funny thing is, I did a couple amps that stood out that I was thinking of recently. I did a repair for George Lynch on an old Music Man HD something another, right? And which is a solid state preamp with a tube power section.
Right.
And they're odd amps. But when you plugged in, when I plugged into this one, when we finished it, it was just like, oh man, I might need to get one of these. This sounds amazing. Like,
well, then we touched on that talking to Bob about because that was Brian McLeod's thing. Like, he used to run one of those on 10 with a Strat, two Strat.
And the other thing was when I had, did you see when I had the Neil Young amp in the shop?
Oh, remember I was joking trying to pick it up.
Baldwin Exterminator, yeah.
This amp Exterminator
is up to there, and it has one handle on the top.
It's got a handle on the top, and it weighed like 100.
No wheels or nothing. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to pick that up? What? I said, you need the Game of Thrones, like one of the giants from Game of Thrones or something, to come and pick it up for you. He's your roadie,
I mean, how many speakers were in it? It had like...
Oh, it's like 6.
Yeah, like 15 and...
Yeah, two 15s, 2 like 12s or 10s or something, and then 2 like little like high frequency driver kind of things.
So damn weird.
Solid state amp. But I remember when we fixed the issue that was with it, this was Neil Young's amp, right? Baldwin Exterminator. When we fixed the issue with it, that it was doing, we plugged it in, and it was like this huge semi broken up clean tone. Like, cool. But broken up in a cool way. Like, it was like with this reverb and trem and stuff, and like when you heard it, you're like, oh my god, I need one of those.
Yeah.
This is stupid, but I want one.
This is stupid, but I want one. Well, that's like the L5
because it looks so cool,
Yeah.
And that I think
it's great.
And it's interesting because again, that's something he uses on a regular basis along with his Tweed Deluxe and I think something else. And it's on at various times, and it sounds, God, it sounds amazing, So,
you remember when you were working on Mike Campbell's rig and you had the whole thing set up? Yeah, I mean, so he's got it's a silver Princeton and a Tweed Deluxe, right? Tweed Deluxe,
something like that, yeah.
And then the Vibratone cabinet, and you can turn them all on at once, and that shit sound amazing. Like
that was amazing. And sometimes things just pop out at you. Like there's these unique, weird things that are cool.
He's a good example of a guy that made a tone that's like got all this, this here, totally unique. Like,
I remember Mike Soldano talking about he had this love for those Univox amps. Those Japanese Univox amps. And and those amps, when you look at them, just look visually, they look super cool, almost space age. And he took a lot of how Soldano looked from that kind of vibe, along with some looks of orange and some other things. And he took a lot of how he made Soldano off of that, because he brought it up in the show, and he said, I love those old Univox amps. It looks so cool.
Yeah.
Cool,
man. There's still that you got in your hallway, that Garnet, that's BTO 400.
Yes.
Transformers the size of a house in it. I bet that sounds interesting.
Yep.
Have you plugged that thing in?
I haven't yet.
Oh my!
I need to.
Supposed to be the Randy Bachman tone or something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
our next guest, people are asking, is July 19th. Mick and Dan from That Pedal Show, which is going to be great. We're still working out the time, so I'll post the time on Facebook. I think I know what the time is, but with the time difference and them being in the UK, I'm a little screwy right now. I've had 2 beers. So I can't remember, quite honestly.
Mark, 2 beers. Mark is looped.
I'm looped. 2 beers. Yeah. I'm
He's drinking tequila straight.
Oh man.
Really good tequila though.
Yeah. Well, courtesy of you. It was my birthday, and you're a good friend. Thank you.
It's amazing how one bottle of liquor can really get you a lot of points.
Hey, it's a great gift. There's still plenty left.
Oh yeah.
For those out there.
Yeah, you haven't done it very much.
Yeah.
Oh, Dave's getting bottle platform. Refills. Dave got a refill.
I got a refill right as the show ends. That's okay.
So just to recap on some of the guests we've got coming up. Let me just pull it up on my phone here. So we Mick and Dan on That Pedal Show. I heard from Pete. I might as well tell you right now. I heard from Tim Pierce. He's not going to be able to do the show with me and you, with you, and on July 24th. He's going to be traveling.
Okay.
So we'll reschedule that.
Yeah, that's fine.
For you and Tim Pierce to come on. July 31st is Steve Lukather.
Oh wow, great. Gotta watch that one.
I actually said his last name correctly for all that you pay attention. I said it correctly.
Thank you.
August 7th is Rhett Shull. And then August 21st is Steve from Dan Electro.
Oh, cool.
Great.
August 28th is Jordan Ziff. September 18th is Misha Mansour.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe also I heard from Tosin Abasi, and I've got him scheduled as well. So
that's great.
We got a long list.
Got a real long list of people. You guys, make sure you go to Sweetwater. I'm going to provide a link below. Check out that link. It helps support the channel. Sweetwater is awesome, so please check them out.
Yeah, honestly, if you guys, it really helps support the channel, because we try to bring you this stuff. We don't get paid for any of this,
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a few little costs here and there.
I would assume if you click on there,
we really appreciate it. We appreciate you guys contributing in super chats and everything else, and that really helps a lot. And Sweetwater has been great to us. So if you need,
if you click there, it just takes you to their homepage. Is that right?
Yeah. Anything you want, you click on our link. It helps support the channel. So
there you go.
Yep. We just upgraded to new software. Bob was actually the catalyst of that, and actually, I'm really happy that we did. It looks a lot better. Thanks for your suggestion as well, Pete, to get that fixed and do it.
Yeah, you got to figure it out better than I do, dude. I got to get this. Mark became the master of.
I learned it in like 2 hours. I took the.
I know. As we're doing it here, Mark's having fun putting little scrolling things across the screen of
great
super chats and everything else.
You like that?
Yeah. See, that's awesome.
I
haven't done any of that. I gotta figure that.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if that comes with the free version or because I paid for the the upgraded version. But, yeah, I'm not sure, but I wanted to make sure we had our logo there, just because. So
somebody's asking when Lukather is again. When was that?
Oh man, wait a minute.
July 31st.
Waterford Giant. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
for
you. Nice
Really
super chat.
appreciate that. Thank you.
We appreciate it. Yeah. So Lukather is, wait, I missed it here. When's Lukather again? July 31st, I believe our usual time, 9 p.m. Friday night.
There's a couple other. I'd still like to work on getting Brendan O'Brien for our channel. I'd like to. I'd love to do the same thing with him. We're working on that, and I had thought of another one, and now, of course, his name is escaping me at this moment. Who was the producer that did all the? Sorry, since I have a mental block right now. Who's the producer that did all those Rat records?
Oh, Bo? No,
Bo Hill.
Bo Hill.
I got it. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I would be very interested in trying to get a hold of him.
I haven't heard of his name for so many years.
He's still working. I looked up his website and stuff. He's still working and doing stuff. But he did. If you look at his discography, man, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy through the 80s,
Oh yeah, I mean he did
all those
a ton.
records. And he had great sounds on some of those Rat records and stuff.
Did he do Invasion too? Probably, right?
Yeah, I think he did all of them.
Yeah, I think
every Rat record till recently.
I heard him on a channel. There was no video, but it was just audio, and it was an interview with him talking about working with Rat. It's about half hour long or something like that.
It'd be great to get Warren if you guys could get Warren.
We've tried, but
I'll work on that.
Keep working, please. That would be fantastic.
I'll work on that. Warren. Oh, I went to dinner with Warren.
Did you?
Yeah, it's surreal, kind of. I went to dinner with Jakey Lee, his wife.
Well, we went and saw Jake and Warren. We were standing there with Warren. Remember?
Well, yes, but I went recently, right before kind of all this, right before NAMM, right before all this went down. I went to a Mexican restaurant dinner around the corner here with Jake and Warren and Jake's wife, my wife, Mike Tempesta, Fender, and we're all at this Mexican restaurant, which was great drinks, great everything, but there was a mariachi band the whole time.
Oh,
like a loud. They were actually really good,
right?
But a loud mariachi band, and it was hilarious. It was like we're all kind of looking at each other like, how much do we have to pay him to stop?
Right. You want to talk?
Just so we can talk, because we're sitting around this table and we can't say anything because we can't fucking talk. And you got Warren DeMartini and Jakey Lee, and everyone's sitting around, and you can't talk. Right. And we got a minute when they had a break or something, and then we were talking.
Oh, shit.
I'm like, I'm sorry. I normally come here and they don't have a mariachi band. I will give it to the mariachi band, though. They were great. I mean, it was actually like all real, great instruments and the traditional instruments and all, really done well, but loud. I'm talking full volume loud, like horns and everything. You're like, ouch.
I don't.
Sounds like torture.
Yeah.
But the drinks were great, and so was the food. So it's like they all liked it.
That's awesome, though. Still, Jakey Lee and Warren DeMartini. I could just sit there and stare at them the whole dinner.
Yeah, no, it was fun, and Warren and I were talking a little bit in between things. So, but then all this, the world fell apart.
Yeah,
shortly thereafter. So,
yeah,
here we are.
And here we are. Is Jimmy wearing the mask, Pete? Did you put mask on Jimmy?
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, sorry. I got busy today. I was trying to track down Dave. Dave knows. I was telling him I'm trying to track down ground problems in my studio, noise issues.
Oh.
Jimmy's still maskless, but I'm living on the edge here.
I have a black mask for Jimmy though up front. Like,
do you?
I have a stack of black surgical masks, so you could put it on Jimmy. That would look good on him.
You know where I got that? I bought that. I was walking down Venice Beach, and there's a dude down there that paints, and it's pretty close to Rose in Venice, just a little bit south of there. And this guy, man, that was sitting out there in front of his, he lives there in a place on the, right on the boardwalk, and he's just, hippie looking dude. And that was sitting there, and I was like,
you mean the building that is sort of just in a little bit from the boardwalk on the right? Yeah, there's like an apartment or apartment complex kind of thing or something, or is he
Rose hits the boardwalk?
Yeah,
and it's right by Venice Ale House right there, great little spot. And then just a little bit further south, the next apartment building is where they lived. A couple businesses, and then so that was sitting out there on the sidewalk, and I said, "Man, that's cool." I was like, "How much for that?" And he was almost aloof, like he was like didn't want to talk to me, and he was like didn't think I was serious or something. I was like, "I want to buy that right now. Like, how much?" And he's like, 160. Wouldn't even kind of look at me, and I was like, "Sold." I was like,
I want it.
Cash.
Oh, that's a great picture.
Yeah, I love it. And I paid him cash, and I was like, but I got to go get my car to go get it. And I, I was like, I don't know. I was like, can I get your card or something like that? So, and he's like, I don't have a card. He goes, I don't have a website. I don't have anything. He's just like painting. That's it.
I'm a beach bum, and I sell paintings on the beach.
Right.
Yeah. And that's
right. Actually a good way to live, right?
Probably.
Right.
Probably a much simpler way of life.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
It's totally.
To some degree.
I'm like,
so BV says, Tone Talk, Mark, Dan and Mick was 1 p.m. your time, 6 p.m. UK time. Yeah, I believe that's it. So it's 1 p.m. my time, and that's 11 a.m. your time, Dave? 11, 12.
Okay.
10?
Just remind me.
10 maybe.
Yeah, 10.
Oh, yeah, it's 10. 10. You're right.
Okay, that's convenient. I'll do it here at home, and I'll be having coffee.
There you go.
All right, cool.
Espresso.
Beautiful.
Espresso's enough to sit here for a while, so I better make a bigger cup.
You've had me jealous since you told me about that.
Oh my God. That's that machine I bought after coming back from Europe twice. One of the super automatic coffee things that you see all over Europe,
Right.
And I came back the last time, it's just like buying one.
Got to get it.
Yeah. Like, it's time.
I wake up and I think about that espresso.
That's awesome.
So it literally makes me happy every day.
It was a wise investment.
Yeah, it was hands down. I don't care what I paid for it. Hands down.
Hey, there was a question earlier on that was a part of a super chat, Dave, that asked about the twin sister.
Twin sister is starting to be made now, and will be. That's the one I was looking for, and that will be. Well, here's the deal. So we're starting to make them now. I should start testing them next week. What that really means is before we even announce the release date, I need to have 30 of them made. Probably the release date might be 30 days from when we have 30 of them. Realistically, the official release date. That means we start shipping a couple weeks before the official release date. And then, dealers will violate and sell ahead of time, which is normal. Yeah. And, so, yeah, there you go. So soon, real soon. Finally, I'll be happy to get that out because I love that amp. That's cool. 2-channel Dirty Shirley.
Yeah.
Double the fun.
Awesome. Double the fun. Awesome. All right, cool. All right.
Yeah. Should we split?
Let's split. Yeah, that was great. It was fantastic. Thanks again, Bob.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me, you guys.
In our new software experiment.
Yeah, happy with the new software. Pete, you're welcome anytime, man. Thank you. You have a great week. You guys, everybody have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.